Hello and welcome back to the Out of Spec Podcast channel. Today we're doing another interview from one of the teams from the I-90 Surge Team OG Model S. They took a 2012 Tesla Model S 85 across the country from Seattle to Boston. How are you guys doing, OG Model S team?
What up, what up?
Doing all right.
Doing good. Still love that we took that trip. Like 2 months now.
Yeah, it's been a minute. So the real point of the 2012 Model S was to be used as a benchmark car. I'm sure some people are confused. Okay, you have the Taycan, great charging, Lucid, great efficiency and range. You have the i7 EQS, great luxury. But what is the purpose of the OG Model S? Well, it is the first DC fast charging car. It's one of the first EVs that you could take across the country. And this was used as a benchmark compared to the other EVs to see how much has changed from 10 plus years ago. Of course, we had the 2021 Tesla Model S Plaid, and as a comparison, and so this really was a benchmark to see how much has changed 10 years later. And I gotta say, it took Tesla, the OG Tesla team, 63 hours to get across from Seattle to Boston. You guys stopped in just about, I think, every single state. A few cars were able to skip states to charge, but you guys stopped in every single state, which, hey, you got to really enjoy the experience. You guys stopped an average of 97 miles every single stop. And, this 2012 Tesla Model S only had a degradation of 10%. So I thought that was a pretty interesting mark, right? This really older car. It's still holding up pretty well with time. But I want to get into some impressions. I'll start off with you, Dan. What were your impressions of this trip? Before you even got to the car, before you ever got to it, when Kyle called you, what were your first impressions?
So when Kyle called me, I said absolutely. Just let me make sure I can take the couple days off of work. But I was super excited to participate. At that point, he didn't tell us, I don't think any of us, what car we were getting. So I just said, whatever I get, I get. So overall, it was just excitement and saying yes super quick, and then probably thinking about things like, wow, does this mean like no hotel, like really no sleep, and how's this going to work like later? But right away, I was like, anything I can do to get involved, I thought it was a great idea. So it was very intriguing for sure.
Awesome. Now, when you did hear that you were going to be in the OG Model S, what was running through your mind?
So my family and I got into Teslas in 2018. So our oldest vehicle we've ever owned, as far as Tesla, is a 2018. Now we had like a 2011 Leaf, a 2014 Leaf, and we've got an older 500e too. So I get the old technology, but this was truly my first experience with anything from a Tesla older than a 2018. So I don't think I knew what I was getting into. I did not realize how slow things used to be as far as charging, and just how many basic necessities that everybody expects on a Tesla today we're missing on the old car. I'm sure we're going to get into more of that later, but just things like basic lane keep, or even more rudimentary, like a basic semi-fast charger for your phone. So I had no idea that Tesla had come so far, honestly, from like 2012 to 2018 when we picked up our first Model 3. So, it was kind of blind ignorance. And I was like, let's go, whatever. And then we figured out that, ooh, this is not quite the modern amenities that maybe we're used to.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. So I do want to say beforehand, right, Dan, you own a Cybertruck, two Model Ys, three Model 3s, a Fiat 500e, as well as a Nissan Leaf. So your experience with electric vehicles, particularly Teslas, is pretty extensive. As well as Tom, he owns a Model 3 Performance, as well as a Rivian R1S. And then Alex, right, you own a 465,000-mile 70D Tesla Model S. So you're pretty you have a good understanding of what this road trip would have been. Tell me, what were your thoughts? What was running through your mind when you first heard that you were going to be in the 2012 Model S 85?
Yeah, so I kind of come from sort of the exact opposite end of the spectrum from Dan. I work on electric vehicles for a living, particularly a lot of older Teslas. So most of my experience is with pretty much anything older than 2015, 2016. And that's most of my world is dealing with those older cars. So I have a lot of experience with them from that side, rebuilding drive units and that kind of thing. And I have to say I was pretty impressed with the condition of this particular car. I actually used to work at QC Charge, one of the owners there is who provided the car, and I had actually previously in my time there I had worked on that car before he was involved in QC Charge. So yeah, it was. I actually had a little bit of history with that particular car.
That's awesome. And I do want to mention, yes, thank you to QC Charge and Conduit EV for allowing Out of Spec to take this EV and, take it 3,000 plus miles. Kyle drove this car from San Diego all the way up to Seattle for this exact trip. And so a lot of miles were added to this. I'll move on to kind of Tom, and then I'll kind of segue back. What was going through your head, right, when you were told that, hey, you're going to be in a 2012 Tesla Model S, coming from a Rivian R1S, coming from a Model 3 Performance? What was going through your head there?
Yeah, it was kind of funny actually because when Kyle asked me about it, I was like, heck yeah, I love old EVs. Um, and the funny thing is, I wanted to nearly buy one for a while actually. I love what started what we have in today's age with the Model 3s, current Gen S's and stuff. I love playing around with original tech, original designs of stuff, original mass produced stuff like the original Model S. So I was stoked about it. I knew I would lose some creature comforts coming from my car. Um, I was already feeling like my 2019 is old since it's not getting the latest updates and stuff anymore. Um, Now it feels new again. I'll just put it that way. But no, I was super stoked and thrilled to join the Surge. Um, I previously wanted to join the truck race, but um, despite them leaving nearly out of Orlando where I live, I couldn't make it because I had work. But I was stoked to get invited to this one. This was a blast.
Awesome. If you guys, I'll go one by one. If you guys could have picked any other vehicle to be in, what would it have been? I'll start with you, Dan.
I didn't put it in my tag here, but I'm spotted model on X, right? And often I'm in Chicago. I work kind of every other week in Chicago, and I happen to walk by Chicago Porsche or Porsche of Chicago every other week, and I always stop and stare and take a picture of a Taycan, and so that would definitely be would have been top of my list for sure.
Okay. Awesome. I honestly don't blame you. That thing was beautiful, and we saw what a beast it was during that entire trip. Alex, what about you?
I don't know. That's a little bit of a hard question to answer. There's so many of the cars were great options on the trip, and I don't know. It would be hard to pick any one of them. After the trip was over, I actually ended up driving one of the cars back to Colorado. I drove the Hyundai Ioniq 6, and I was actually pretty impressed with that car for sure. And it was actually my first ever long distance road trip with car with CCS. I've done lots of trips supercharging and even trips on CHAdeMO, but that was actually my first CCS road trip. And yeah, I don't know. From all the cars out there that we had on the Surge, I don't know if I could pick any one as what I would have thought would be the best.
What did you? I mean, I'll say this: Ionic 6 or Model S, your OG Model S.
The OG Model S certainly had its charm, as far as the trip goes. In terms of bringing something, that has the, I don't know, I guess sort of the prestige or the history, in terms of being the first on the road. The Ioniq 6 definitely had a lot more kind of creature comforts as far as the usability of the car. It had, pretty decent lane keeping assist and radar cruise control. Decently fast phone charging, and pretty reasonably comfortable seats in my opinion, which is a little bit lacking in the old Model S in my opinion. But yeah, the radar cruise control in particular, that was getting pretty tough there by the end of the trip, not having that on the old Model S.
I imagine. Tom, what about you? What car would you have rather been in from that race if it wasn't the OG Model S?
I had to think hard about that one because I love all cars, but because I'm such an efficiency nut, I probably would have wanted to try the long range single motor Model 3 that they had, that Tesla just came out with, just so I could, almost like a video game, see how efficient I can be, see what numbers I can beat with that thing. Um, I've seen some crazy efficiency from this trip and from other owners who started buying them. Um, so yeah, and it's familiar with my car, but I would love to play around with how efficient I could drive that. A close second would probably be the EQS. I'm slightly jealous you got to drive the EQS. I see it, but that thing looked so cool um, from the inside.
Yeah, the EQS was definitely a great car. But I gotta say, at the end of the race when we all met in Boston, um, being able to sit in the OG Model S, I was still very surprised that from the ground up, from back from 2012, Tesla's made a pretty, I wouldn't say future proof. I mean, right, it's aged, but it still holds up very well in 2024. Uh, for you go to most vehicles back then, you really can't say that. So let's actually go into this charging map here. So we started in Seattle, Washington. We left at about 2:19 p.m. You guys had your first stop in Moses Lake, Washington. Can you tell me how accurate was the Tesla road trip planner? And why was your first stop in Moses Lake versus, I would say, stopping a little earlier, maybe going a little longer? If you guys could tell me about that.
I don't remember, so I was busy filming
I,
for that.
yeah,
Like,
I, I think originally we were going to try and stretch it further to whatever the next one was down the road, and I can't remember where that was exactly. But yeah, Moses Lake ended up being the furthest that we could possibly make it, and the goal on the old Model S is run it as low as possible to maximize the charging curve for sure.
I think we can. So I look back at this and I'm like, wow, we did 178 miles on that first run because I don't think we ever did that again. But I think we were super. I think we felt we had a better chance at the beginning. When we all started at the same time out of the Starbucks World headquarters. But wow, looking at it now, that's a long time because everything else was almost. We joked later on, almost on the hour that we would stop, on the hour, on the hour, on the hour. It was almost like always at the top of the hour. So yeah, that was crazy. That was also the time I remember when we pulled off first and we were looking at everybody on the map and we knew that right there we knew we were going to lose, right? But right there we knew that everybody else was long gone after that first stop.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Looking at this graph here, thank you, Jordan Golson, who's also on Team EQS, for providing us with all this. You guys stopped, yeah, just about on the hour every single hour. But your first stop, you made it 178 miles. And then just 54 miles later, you guys made your second stop.
Right.
So instead of stretching it out even further, what made you guys go only 54 miles the next stop?
So I'll jump in, and then Alex is the true charging genius here. But first of all, the first run we started at 100%, so that's why we were like double. That's really the reason. Every other stop, we realized pretty quick that as soon as that old Model S hit 50, 51, 52%, it would just flatline. So that's really our strategy changed pretty quick, just to say, let's get to 50 or 52, 53, and just roll. It was not worth it after that.
Yeah, Alex.
Yeah, the way the curve works on the old Model S is you want to roll in basically just as low as possible, single digit percentage for sure. And it'll peak, at maybe 120 something kilowatts for a couple of seconds, and then it pretty quickly tapers off from there. Usually by the time you're at 10%, it's under 100 kilowatts, and by the time you're 20, 30, 40%, it just continues to taper. And usually by the time we hit 50%, we were down to probably about 45, 50 kilowatts, something like that.
Yep.
And that's just the way it charges. So in order to get the maximized charging, it's basically just stop as often as possible and get that little bit of peak of the curve that we could get.
Okay. What was the most memorable or challenging part of this race for your guys' team?
That's a good question. I could think of a couple of challenges we ran into. One was charging our phones. There's only, I think, one or maybe two USB-A ports in the entire car. Um, and there was a 12 volt that we eventually got a charger for. I was charging my phone solely off my MacBook the whole time. Um, Apart from that, other thing I noticed was, we have basic cruise control, um, and I guess you could say we're kind of spoiled these days with adaptive cruise control and lane keep assist and things like that. Um, I didn't use it at all when I was driving. I was like, I'd rather just drive myself because I'll get comfortable. But I mean, apart from that, it wasn't that challenging. At least from my point of view. Maybe just because I was too excited to drive an old car. Who knows?
I think one thing that we were challenged with is I honestly think we not only were out the longest, so 63 hours, I bet we got the least amount of sleep because it's super hard to take a nap when you're stopping every hour. So, I watch the video and I see some people doing 2, 3, 3.5 hours between stops, and that's a good nap. But I don't think any of us, well, none of us slept through a charging stop. So that means none of us probably got more than an hour's sleep total. It really, the first night was okay. The second night, going into the second night was okay. But for me personally, I was so happy that Alex drove the last 4 hours because I was at that point with like 60 hours basically being awake. I was starting to hallucinate. I was starting to see stuff that wasn't there. I kept thinking we were driving into a cave and like going underground. And Alex assured me those were like trees, not like rock walls. And we had to talk to each other to keep each other awake. But I was like, those last 4 hours were just killing me. That was like 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. Monday morning. That was like the worst.
Yeah, Alex, what about you?
Yeah, definitely got pretty rough, especially there by the end, as far as lack of sleep goes. Um, and yeah, just talking to each other, really, really made all the difference in being able to stay awake. So that was definitely one of the biggest challenges. Like Dan said, most of the time we were only driving about an hour between stops, and I don't think any of us, yeah, I don't think any of us ever slept through a charging stop. But we would try and sleep whatever we could, on the road in between. So yeah, that was definitely a big challenge. And yeah, the phone charging thing, that was a big thing on like the first day, especially is with all the filming and stuff, everybody's phones were going dead, and the super slow USB-A chargers in the car could barely keep up with keeping anybody's phones charged. And yeah, we ended up having to get one that plugged into the 12 volt outlet that could actually charge at somewhat decent speeds to keep everybody's phones from dying.
I I was going to say, I think the other thing is that, watching part four of the video when everybody was at dinner and it literally said everyone made it to dinner but the old Model S team. I don't think any of us at the time, in fact, at least I don't think any of us realized that everybody's sitting around having a great dinner and we were like in Ohio or something. We were so far back. So, it was, we would have all loved to be at that dinner, but I don't think we had a clue that we were that far behind. I mean, when I see the video, it was like, wow, that was pretty rough.
I mean, yeah, I remember us at the dinner. Of course, I was the only one of four of us there, but yeah, we were looking at the Life 360, and we were like, oh my gosh, you guys are so far behind. We're trying to calculate what time you guys would come in. I mean, would you guys have done anything differently when it comes to maybe charging or the pace or anything you've done differently for this race?
Nothing I can think of per se. We were super on par with our charging system. Um, I mean, the car was pretty cut and dry on what you could do from a charging speed perspective, charging curve perspective. Um, yeah, nothing I can think of. I was like feathering the throttle as much as I could to get super efficient. So
I think the only thing that I would say, I think we nailed most charging stops with rolling in at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%. I think we could have reacted a little bit faster east of, I don't know, Indiana when the speeds dropped, right? Because then for a while we were rolling in maybe too high, 12, 15%, because the speed through South Dakota, et cetera, was a lot higher. So the efficiency was lower. But I think we could have probably, it might have saved us 15, 20 minutes. Not big. But to Tom's point, we were pretty right on with charging stops. I wouldn't have done anything that much different other than maybe cut it just a few minutes early for the next stop once we hit east of Indiana.
Yeah, I think that's yeah, pretty much what both of you guys said. There were a few times before that where we had the higher speeds where we had to decrease speed to make it to the chargers. So before that, maybe if we would have charged a little bit more, that could have saved us a little bit too, because we would have been able to keep up our speed. But yeah, I don't think there's really much that we could have done to really save a lot of time, other than stopping even more often than we did to get the peak charging speeds, which then you've got your extra time getting off the highway and stuff. So I'm not so sure that there's a whole lot that we really could have done to improve on what we did.
Awesome. Okay, so I think this is a great time to kind of go down straight through some of the charging stops that you guys had. So I'll open this Excel spreadsheet here. So yeah, so peak kilowatt observed, right? It's sticking like 120. I see a peak of like 128 here. You guys had in Coeur d'Alene. Am I pronouncing that correctly? And you guys got 36 kilowatt hours delivered here. And at peak, you can see this data here. So at peak, you guys had 53 kilowatt hours delivered into the vehicle. And for the most part, charging was pretty smooth. I mean, the Tesla supercharging network, even though Tesla has actually derated what the OG Model S is capable of doing, still the network's super reliable. And so you're kind of able to go through it really smooth. You guys only had one hiccup, it seemed, but charger worked, but derated. And then I believe you guys also had another charger, if you guys want to correct me if I'm right, that didn't work and you guys just moved to a different stall.
Yeah, I think that we might have had one time that we had to switch stalls, and then there was one charger that was only like 100 kilowatts or something, I think was all that it would peak at.
I think it might have been lower. It was like only double digits possibly. It was like 90 something or 80 something. It was really bad.
Yeah, maybe so. And I think that really long stop, was that in Billings that we added our most power? I suspect that probably was it.
So Missoula,
Oh,
Missoula.
Missoula. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
you guys were there for more than an hour, um, just kind of sitting and charging.
I don't remember that stop. Where? What? Go over to the right. What amenities were there? Were we able to do anything? Let me see. What does it say?
Let's see. So gas station, store, and Best Western nearby.
I totally have blanked that entire hour from my mind.
Oh, I think I do remember that one. There definitely wasn't very much there. Most of the ones in Montana didn't have very much for amenities.
Montana was a lot. We spent a lot of time in Montana.
Yeah. No, I see Superior,
Yep.
Missoula, Butte, Bozeman, Big Timber. Yeah, you guys were there for quite a while.
That may have been our most stops in one single state. Might have been Montana.
It never ended.
I wonder.
Big state. Yeah, you guys got in there, Montana, 8 p.m. and then left at 2:49 a.m.
Jeez, yeah.
Yeah. Whole night.
That was a pretty long run though from Montana to Sheridan. So I remember we pulled in Sheridan and it was sunrise. I remember watching the sunrise, and so that was actually a pretty long run if I look at the time there.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking maybe that was our one where we added the most power, because that run from into Sheridan, that was a pretty long run.
Right.
I actually have I gave it to Isaiah. One of the photos was actually that sunrise you were talking about.
Hmm.
I got it while you were driving.
Yeah, it's good.
So,
Yeah.
and I'll kind of go back here. So I see in Genoa, Ohio, you guys departed 48% and you got to Genoa with 18%. Compared to some of the other stops, right? You guys are getting here at 4, 3, 5, 1. Super low state of charge. We see here, right? Indiana, Ohio. You guys started to leave.
That's where we should have adjusted faster. Yeah, we just started arriving and then we learned again. But I remember that stretch where we were just rolling in with too much juice.
Yeah, I think the speeds just slowed down quite a bit, and we just kind of overcompensated for what we thought we needed to do.
Yeah, less speeds and less elevation. We're now driving basically flat areas.
Okay. And I see here, so actually it's not listed. I'll cut this little part out, but I'll ask, what state of charge did you guys arrive at the USS Constitution in Boston, Massachusetts with?
So we didn't. We were so late that we got into the hotel at like 5:50, whatever it says here, 5:54, and I remember we felt a little bad because we rolled into that hotel at like what 2 or 3%, and we're like, who's ever gonna drive this car next has no charge. But we were like, we did not want to stop one more time, so I think we rolled in at what was it, 2%? Super low.
Yeah, it was pretty low, but yeah, we didn't actually go to the Constitution. We just went straight to the motel because we wanted
Nobody
to
would
get
have
some
been there,
sleep.
and it
That's
would have
for
been
sure.
locked. I mean, yeah.
I think that when Kyle went to try and charge the car, he tried to go to a supercharger that had been like ripped out. There was nothing there anymore, and I think someone did have to come and rescue him to get the car charged again because he couldn't make it to the next closest supercharger.
We rolled in lean.
That's a funny part. Do you have any like funny, crazy things that happened during this journey?
I can think of several.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I mean we have Dan with all of the landmarks as we have to charge anyway, so we're finding some of the coolest landmarks. There you go. There's one. We visited Corn Palace, um, and then the funny thing was our conversations are also pretty funny. There's a clip in I think like episode 3 or 4, one of them, where Dan was having a very very important conversation about the frunk. About front cargo. I won't spoil it for people who haven't watched the video, but it was super funny. Trying not to laugh while filming it. And then,
Yeah, I thought it was
oh,
pretty. I thought it was pretty wild that these guys. I don't think Alex or Tom had ever been to South Dakota, and I used to have the whole state for my job, and so I was able to give them a ton of useless information about history and road mark, things to see on the way and points of interest and all that great stuff. I was like the tour guide from like Wyoming because I used to have Wyoming, South Dakota, into Minnesota, Wisconsin. Like that was my territory in a couple of jobs ago that I had. So I was able to fill everybody's heads with useless info.
I remembered one really super funny detail that we kept forgetting to close the charge port.
Oh my gosh, that darn door.
So um, it's like just like a magnet, I guess, and we can't close it from inside the car. So
Yeah.
there is like I'd say like maybe half, if not more, of leaving our charging stops. We had the charge port open.
And finally, we're like, screw it, it's staying open. Like it's, but it's like, why would Tesla make a car that didn't automatically close the charge port door?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, and they did fix that later on with
Yeah.
late 2014 was when they finally put a motorized charge port door on them. But yeah, the early ones, it's just that little magnetic door on it that keeps it closed. And yeah, it's like probably even by the end we were still forgetting to close it,
Yeah.
like probably every other
Yep.
stop.
The other thing is that that Model S had like 16 stalks on the wheel, like so many stalks. Like you could control a space station with that thing. So you'd hit. I would think that I'm hitting the left turn signal, and I was activating cruise control. So I'm going into an intersection with no TACC, and I would hit the cruise, and I was going to stop and turn left because traffic was coming. This thing would just kick in. It was very dangerous. It would just kick in on cruise instead of a left turn signal. So I would activate cruise and either hard brake or have to just roll through the intersection because you. It's so weird how they put the cruise and the blinker stocks like I swear an inch and a half from each other, and they both kind of feel the same. Wild stuff.
And they're like swapped from the positions
Yeah,
where they should be.
right.
The cruise
Yep.
control is above the turn
Right.
signal, which is
That's
just
where, yeah,
it's very confusing if you don't know where it's at.
yeah,
100%. I remember trying to regen sometimes, and I had realized I had the cruise control on for like 5 minutes without realizing it.
yeah. Strange cruise control placement for sure.
And do you guys think if you were charging on CCS, I mean, again, I can reiterate Tesla Supercharger network, even on the I-90 between Idaho and Ohio, where this long stretch kind of barren, do you guys think if you were in a CCS car with a same age of vehicle, right, really not high range, do you guys think you would have made it?
I mean, there's certainly not any CCS vehicles that would have been out in
Yeah,
that same year. I think the first CCS vehicle to go on sale in North America was the Spark EV, right? So that would have been 2014. And that car only has like 100 miles of range. So I don't know when the
really.
first like longer range CCS car was, but yeah, there certainly would have been tons of places where it just wouldn't have been possible with an older CCS car because they just wouldn't have the range, especially going through Montana and Wyoming and those
Oh yeah.
places.
I want to think that if Kyle would have called and said you get to pilot a 2014 Spark across the country, I might not have been as enthusiastic. I don't think.
We might still be out there right now had we taken this.
No.
Awesome. So before I close this out, what did you guys, I mean, again, you guys are the benchmark, the OG Model S. So much has changed compared to today, right? We saw what the Tesla Model 3 long range rear wheel drive did. And we also saw what the Model S Plaid did. Did you guys expect the gap to be this wide?
Truthfully, I expected it to be wider. Like, I was slightly pleasantly surprised with our arrival time. I thought we were,
Really? Oh my
I was
god!
like,
Really?
when I was thinking about it on the trip, on the flight over, I'm like, are we going to be like a day late? Like a whole 24 hours late?
Pretty
Like,
much.
we didn't arrive quick, but I'm like, hey, I mean, it's still, especially when you put in perspective of, can you road trip this car? You absolutely can. Like, you, sure, you won't arrive as fast as other current ones, but it's really far from impossible. Like, it was still a pretty pleasant drive, especially if you're normal and stay at hotels,
Yeah.
and not us and keep going.
I didn't expect quite that late of arrival. I think I was a little bit more optimistic, but again, my experience with older Teslas was very limited before then. So I was a little bit blissfully unaware. I knew we'd be last. I did not realize we'd be rolling in at 6 a.m. Monday morning. You know what? Maybe I did because I did make sure that my plane ticket wasn't until after 2 p.m. Monday. So maybe I was hoping for better, but maybe I really knew that it was going to be pretty slow.
Yeah, I was maybe slightly more optimistic than our actual arrival time, and yeah, I think we all kind of went into it knowing that we were pretty much almost certainly going to come dead last, unless something crazy happened with stack up at the CCS chargers, problems with infrastructure, or maybe the i7 getting even more derated than it was. But yeah, we kind of went into it knowing that we were probably going to be last for sure.
Yeah, I will tell you the one, we had lots of fun and I don't regret it. I think it was awesome. The one area that it paid off for us to be slower, and you guys know this, was that we rolled through Chicago at like 6 a.m. Sunday morning and we watched everyone else the night before get stuck in traffic. We had beautiful traffic through Chicago. We never even slowed down. We stayed at 55, 60, 65 all the way through the city. So that was like a great bonus in my mind. I remember we were pretty excited about that because we saw all the horror stories from traffic.
Yeah,
I think
I
that
gotta
was one
say,
of my better naps. I actually slept all the way through Chicago.
Yeah, I know you were trying to stay awake because you'd never seen it before. I'm like, dude, you got to see the Hancock Tower, you got to see the Willis Tower, and you're like, and you were like fading, and I'm like, oh my gosh. There, Chicago, 8:30.
right.
Janesville was early, yeah, and then Chicago. Yeah, we cruised through Sunday morning traffic beautifully.
Yeah, I vaguely remember just coming into the outskirts of Chicago,
Yeah,
and then I woke up like as we were getting to the next charging stop that was after that, and it was like, oh, we went through Chicago, and I missed the whole thing.
yeah, you woke up in Rolling Prairie, Indiana, I think. That
Yeah,
was a good stretch.
Yeah, Model S did a lot. I like, it's a bit of a mixture of what everyone said. I thought the Model S would do a lot worse. I was actually thinking like a whole day later. I was still surprised, right, by the difference. But regardless, right, I mean, 2012 Tesla's made a vehicle that can get you from Seattle to Boston in one piece. It might be 20 hours later, but right, it it did it, right? And I think that's the whole benchmark here. I'll go one by one before we head out. The Taycan. Were you guys surprised? I mean, initially, I'll start with you, Dan. Who did you think was going to be first, second, third? What did you think the outcome of this race would have been?
So I was okay. I thought, like many people, I thought Lucid would be first. You know that I make fun of Lucid drivers because they can go like 8 hours without charging. So I thought that was going to be number one. I thought probably Taycan and then Model S Plaid. I was not thinking about the Model 3, which is weird because we own three of them, and I had just sold a friend at work the same spec like the week before, but I didn't realize how good her car was. So that was like the surprise to me, the model, how well the Model 3 did for like a third the price of the Taycan. But the Lucid, the Lucid's the controversy, and there's lots of stuff online about, was it staged? Was it, did Dave and team set out to make everyone look bad? No, of course not. But I was surprised the Lucid didn't do better, and I was pleasantly surprised around the Model 3.
Yeah, I think that when before it started, I was pretty sure that the Taycan was the car that I thought would win, because I had seen some of Kyle's videos and stuff previously on the charging on it, and the charging was just absolutely insane. Holding 300 kilowatts past 60%. I figured that it would have the edge over the Lucid. I thought that the Lucid was probably going to be a close second. Um, and yeah, even despite their issues where running out of charge, even if that wouldn't have happened, it looked like they probably wouldn't have come in second, even if that weren't the case. Which I was pretty surprised by. I thought that it would have done better. And the Model 3, I mean, that car and the Ionic 6 were like neck and neck the whole way. It was pretty amazing how close those two were. And I didn't expect that the Ionic 6 would be that close. When it came to the end, I thought there would have been a bigger gap between that and the Model 3. But yeah, the Model 3 was pretty amazing in terms of its efficiency and stuff. That car did extremely well.
Yeah, Tom.
Yeah, my top three was gonna be Lucid first, Taycan close second, and then the Plaid with the aero wheels third. I was I was bummed out when I saw it happen to Lucid. I was like, no. But at that point, I was like, okay, yeah, Taycan's gonna win. Um, Charging is absolutely insane. I was also jealous to get to drive that car. That's just a super fun car, even regardless of the charge, just fun to drive. Um, but yeah, the Model 3 rear-wheel drive was it probably surprised all of us because we're used to what Model 3s can do, whether it be LFP standard with one motor. We've seen those. We've seen dual motor, large battery, long range specs, but the the new long range rear wheel drive, we never really had any data on it, and so I was loving seeing how well that thing was doing. Um, if I had known about it, I probably would have said that would have came. I probably put that maybe third in my estimations, maybe. But yeah, I think it was a wild card for all of us. Um, and yeah, I had Lucid going first originally.
Same. Yeah, no, the Porsche was definitely a I just wasn't expecting that at all. I had some hype built up to it because this was a new model year. I believe Porsche like shipped this straight from Europe, right? Like this was a vehicle that people were betting on, and I was like, I've heard of the Taycan's range, and it charges well, but I really was not expecting it to be first. But like you said, Alex, for a large part of the race, I mean, from your perspective, you guys were so far in the back, enjoying yourselves. But a large part of the races, I mean, us and the EQS were right neck and neck for the Ionic. Ionic was right next to the Plaid. The Plaid and the Lucid were switching places, and then the rear-wheel drive Model 3 was right there. And it was definitely towards the end we were trying to catch up to the Model S Plaid, and then also trying to catch up to the Ionic. And as we got closer to Boston, things started to separate themselves. But it was a lot closer than I expected, right? I didn't think that it would be so close, right? I thought it'd be a lot more spread out. But it just shows that whether in a 2012 Model S or you're in something new today, that you're going to get across the country. And if you're in something new today, right, you're going to, it's really pins and needles there. It's so close. And yeah, no, I'm glad you guys had fun. It was an honor meeting you three. I want to know, would you guys do it again?
100% yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, sign me up for sure. And I think back to, there's still plenty of old Model S's around with SCO1 free supercharging. If I was retired, maybe didn't have anyone along for the ride and just wanted to cruise the country, I would totally take advantage of a slowed down road trip just to see the sights, go back to the Corn Palace or whatever, and just keep rolling. So no knock on the Model S. It was a crazy amount of tech 12 years ago, and it's still great today. So yeah, I would if we were to do it again, whether it be an SUV challenge or whatever is next, yeah, sign me up.
Awesome. Look, again, honor. Thank you guys so much for spending time and talking with me about this. Um, Look, I'll have everyone's links in the descriptions. Alex's page, Tom, as well as Dan. You're over here, Dan. And yeah, thank you guys so much for joining me. Do you guys have any exiting messages? Any notes?
Older EVs can still road
Not that I
trip.
can read them. What was that?
I said older EVs can still road trip. Don't think you can't.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and even compared, I mean, all the other cars that we had on this trip were kind of like the top of the line, new cars out there. But there's even new cars on the market that probably wouldn't hold up as well as the Model S on a road trip, like BZ4Xs and such of the world.
I would take an old Model S over a lot of new EVs and probably almost all gas cars.
The funny thing is, from like a ride perspective, I mean, it rode smoother than my Model 3. So like, I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
if it had
You're right.
if the seats were just a little more comfy, I'd be like, heck yeah, I'd road trip that any time over my car.
That was a good point, Alex. Model S, you can really find one of these from like 10 to 20,000 decent miles. And you guys are going against $120,000 vehicles. And the time showed through that, but you guys still made it. So that's worthy of something.
For sure.
Yeah, great point.
It was fun. And it was great meeting all you guys. I'm glad we stayed in touch, and it's a lottery. You could end up with anybody, and we had a great team, so it was awesome.
100%.
Yeah, it was a great time for sure.
I'm glad. Yeah, I would do it all over again. Maybe not the Model S, but we'll see. Well, yeah. This is the I-90 Surge interview with the team 2012 Model S 85 OG Model S. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys for joining me and, again, explaining yourselves. All the information will be in the description, and we hope to see you guys in the next interview.